If a decision has you stuck for weeks, watch how the 1% handle it. So every week, founders and leaders make decisions that quietly shape the next 5 or 10 years of their life, their businesses, whether it's hiring, growth, investments, when to say yes, when to say no, when to walk away. All these decisions don't just affect revenue, they may reflect your time, your energy, your relationships, whether your success actually feels worth it. The problem is most founders were never taught how to make big decisions well, but yet we do it every single day. We're taught to work harder, gather more information, and overthink. And the top 1% don't do that. They use simple, repeatable, consistent filters to make difficult decisions quickly, and then they stop second guessing. So by the end of this video, you're going to have those same filters in your hip pocket for the next important decision that you make. And these are clear frameworks that you can use to run any big decision through your own nervous system so you can decide faster, with more confidence, and without staying stuck looping for weeks. So one of my favorite stories of all time is an interaction between Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill. So in the early 1900s, Andrew Carnegie was known as one of the most powerful, influential, and richest men in the United States, and widely considered one of the richest men actually in the world. Carnegie looked around at several of his friends who were also very successful and had this idea that success leaves clues, and that there was these laws of success that all of his friends had repeated, including him, that got them to where they were. He noticed that the most successful people he knew shared common ways of thinking and making decisions. And one of the biggest patterns that he noticed was fast, decisive decision making and following the long-term commitment that came after that. Napoleon Hill had met Andrew Carnegie, and at the time he was this young up-and-coming journalist. Carnegie saw something in Napoleon Hill and he invited him to come over, and Carnegie painted the vision of this massive idea for Napoleon Hill. And this is all alleged, but he basically said, Napoleon, I believe that we need to codify the laws of success. And I don't believe anyone's done it in a very formulaic way yet. He said, I'm not necessarily a writer, but I see your potential. I have this vision for you to go and interview all of my friends and colleagues that are the most successful people on the planet and codify these principles of success. But he said, here's the caveat. I am going to open up my Rolodex so you can interview all of these people, and you need to dedicate the next several decades to this project to ultimately turn it into a book. And I believe if you learn all of these principles, you are going to become wildly successful, more than you could have ever imagined. And so sitting across his desk is Napoleon Hill, basically in this decision point of, am I about to dedicate the next 2 decades of my life to this project? Reportedly, Andrew Carnegie had a timer under his desk, and he was seeing how long it was going to take Napoleon Hill to make this decision. And he knew that if it took him way too long to make the decision, then he wasn't his guy, and he was going to go look for someone else to do the project. And apparently it took Napoleon Hill less than a minute to make the decision, and he said, I'm in, I'll do it. Hill had that decisiveness required to commit to the decision, but not only that, but carry the work forward. And because of that, Carnegie opened up his Rolodex to the most successful, respected people in the world. And Hill went on to spend 2 decades studying hundreds of high achievers, including industrialists, inventors, business leaders. The research ultimately became Think and Grow Rich, which was published in 1937, which is the GOAT, the greatest of all time business and success book still to this day. And there's a chapter in here on decision that talks about how procrastination is the opposite of decision. It's the sneakiest form of indecision. And so the point here is the most successful people decide quickly and change that decision slowly. They avoid flip-flopping. So if you want to be part of that 1%, part of your job is to get in the habit and build that muscle of making decisions quicker. Hey, by the way, if you're new here, I'm Jennifer Hudye Moscow. I've built 3 7-figure businesses before 30. I've helped thousands of 7 to 9-figure founders over the last decade across all different businesses, including working with top thought leaders like Tony Robbins, Dan Martell, Joe Polish, JJ Virgin, Dave Asbury, and many others. And I now help entrepreneurs design a life and a business by design by showing them how to craft a vivid vision for the future, master their calendar and their time, and tap into the universal laws of success. This second piece is they don't waste their time and their energy on insignificant decisions that they can automate so that they can save that energy for the essential ones. So for example, when I go out for dinner with people, I have this kind of like secret thing that I do where I look around and I see how long it takes people to make the decision of what they're going to eat for dinner. Or if I'm standing in line in the coffee shop and I see someone literally agonizing on if they're going to get the latte or the cappuccino. Here's the deal, the 1% do not do this. Research shows that as adults, we make about 35,000 decisions every day. And of those, there's only a fraction of those decisions, maybe 100 to 200, where we actually kind of stop and think. But then within those, there's only, a handful that are actual consequential to our future. And so the top 1%, they filter out the noise of all of those other decisions and they only focus on the decisions that matter so that they have the most horsepower and energy and focus. And then they delegate the rest of those non-essential decisions. For example, if you have to decide every day whether you're gonna go to the gym or not, you're wasting that decision. If you're deciding every day, what am I gonna put in my coffee? You're wasting your decision-making power. The most successful people do not do that. Okay, and finally though, how do we ground this into action? What are some decision-making filters or questions that you can use if you're in the middle of a really big decision right now that feels like it's really gonna shape your future one way or the next? Well, one of my favorite quotes is by Roy Disney, and he says, decisions become simple when you know what your values are. And I actually believe decisions become simple when you know what your values are and when you know what your vision is. And so one of the most powerful questions that I ask and I train my clients that are running very large businesses is this decision aligned to my vision? You want to think, is this decision going to move me closer to that future or further away from that future? Now, if you're still looping on that, another way that I like to view this is thinking about myself from third person. So there's this concept called Solomon's paradox. And basically it comes from the origin of Solomon, who was known as this very wise sage in the Bible. However, he was kind of known for giving everybody else really good advice, but he would never take his own advice. And isn't that true for us? As oftentimes we can give the best advice on decision making to others, but then when it comes to ourselves, we can get paralyzed. And so the way that I've figured out how to hack this for myself is I imagine going into my imagination and transporting myself to my 85-year-old self, the version of me in the future that's this wise, grounded, relaxed woman who just feels clear, content, feels like she's lived out her life to her highest potential. And then I'm looking sort of in third person to current me. I imagine the two of them having a dialogue and my wise version of myself giving advice. That's like, she's already handled it. This is behind her. What kind of advice would she give current me around this specific instance? Because I believe one of the best persons that you could get advice from is first off your future self, because they literally lived the experience and saw themselves on the other side. Number two is people who are where you want to go in that specific instance. Do not delegate your decision-making power to people who are not where you want to go in that area, because you're going to adopt their mindset, which you don't want. Like if you're getting advice from your friend who's single and has chaos in her relationships around what you should do in the situation with your husband, that ain't the person to go to. So either find a mentor or someone you admire, respect, or hire a coach, but someone who you actually respect in that area, who has the knowledge and wisdom to share. So again, asking, does this align with my vision for the future and my values? Imagine transporting yourself to your 85-year-old self, giving you the advice. A third filter that I'll use sometimes for decision-making is, will I regret not having done this? For example, this year I sat down and I thought, okay, it's the end of the year. What are the decisions will I have regret not having done? And for me, one of them was launching a YouTube channel, because I said that I wanted to do that for years. And so by making the decision from that place, it helped me move forward. And then the final filter is, what is the decision the most extraordinary version of myself would make in this moment? So again, I will sometimes imagine myself in third person, and I'm watching me, like me in this reality, almost like I'm living a movie, okay? And I'm going through it and I'm at this decision point and it's a little scary. Maybe I'm like, am I going to make this really big investment in my business? And it feels scary, yeah? I'll imagine myself in third person watching the movie and I'm like, oh, what is she gonna do? And I'm eating popcorn. Like, is she gonna make the decision? Is she gonna collapse into her kind of smaller self or her bigger self? What is the decision that she would need to make to where in the movie, everybody's clapping, including myself watching this? Like, yes, she moved forward into who she's here to be. Here's the thing, the top 1% of people, they still feel fear and scared in making the decision. They just make it anyways. One of my favorite quotes is by Dan Sullivan, and he said, fear is wetting your pants. Courage is doing what you gotta do with wet pants. And that's what the 1% have mastered. They have mastered how to make big, high stakes decisions with wet pants sometimes. So the final piece I'll leave you with is the top 1% realize that making a decision is better than being in procrastination and indecision. So you gotta be willing to accept that you may make the quote unquote wrong decision, okay? And you gotta just take it as feedback. I like to imagine it's kind of like Google Maps. If you plug in, okay, here's where I'm at right now, and you plug in an address across the country. And maybe you're driving and get a little distracted, you're singing in the car and you realize that you missed your exit. Okay, yeah, you made the wrong decision in that moment, but Google Maps is going to reorganize and you're gonna take a little bit of a scenic route that may take a little longer, but it's gonna put you back on track. And I really believe that that is how this world and our life is designed, is every once in a while we make the wrong decision, but so long that we're willing to get the learning lessons from it, we'll always get back on track. So take it as feedback. One of my mentors says, we're either winning or we're learning. So in this high stakes decision that you're about to make, run it through those filters and remember that making a decision is better than no decision. So I hope you found this valuable. If you did, go ahead, click like and tap the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.